Columbia University has just opened the Spirituality and Mind-Body Institute. Is this new age mumbo-jumbo, or is it an exciting new field of medicine? Dr. Lisa Miller is the director of the Columbia program. Lorne Schussel works in healing with meditation therapy. Patrick Kearney works with integrative medicine, and Susan Lakatos is a former Wall Street banker who turned to spirituality. Lisa, you founded this program. Can you just tell us what it is and why you started it?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your new program. This is thrilling. It's a fabulous.
Thank you very much. We're super excited. Congratulations on your new program.
Thank you. So as a starter, I would say the two reasons that we were able to launch this innovative program were because, one, we had the foot traffic. Time and time again, we found that the students entering psychology and the healing professions these days already are on a spiritual path. So it's abundantly clear to them that the spiritual reality is close to wellness, important for healing, and most students who we've seen want to be able to integrate spirituality into their professional work. So it was clear to us that in order to offer the type of academic cutting-edge programs to meet the current needs, we had to be concurrent with the new generation of healers.
This is based on, this is based not merely on the desire of students, right, but also on hard science about the link between spirituality and well-being.
Absolutely, and that's, as you say, the second reason was it simply is true that spirituality is core to health and wellness. We have, in our lab and in fellow labs across the country, developed about a decade and a half of very clear, strong evidence that spirituality is more protective against illness and recurrence than anything else known to science, and that we are inherently, as human beings, born spiritual. We are born with essentially the apparatus to understand the spiritual world. So, given the body of evidence, we really no longer were going out on a limb, but we're actually being responsible and current with what is known in the academic research.
And Lisa, just in case we have any scientists or rationalists rolling their eyes at all this, let me just clarify, we're not talking about the power of prayer, we're not talking about if 1,000 people pray for somebody with cancer, that person is going to get better, we're not talking about formal religions. What we're talking about is incorporating spiritual practices, things that we more commonly associate with Eastern philosophies, mindfulness, meditation, and things like that, as stress reduction techniques, essentially?
Well, what we have found in our research, and really time and again the most prominent finding in the scientific research, is that a personal spirituality, which is to say a direct personal sense of relationship to a living universe, to a guiding universe, that personal relationship is, for instance, 80% protective against major depressive disorder, 50% protective against substance use and abuse. And that very same spiritual tendency of relationship with the universe is biologically based. About 30% of the differences among people in that tendency is attributed to genetics. And we can see in MRI research that those who, over time, have a personal relationship with the universe, a personal spirituality, show a thicker cortex, which is known to be associated with high IQ and protective against Alzheimer's. So we have at multiple levels of scientific inquiry very strong evidence that a healer would want to use as a lead foot a spiritual awareness. Again, spirituality can exist within or without a personal religion. It is a personal understanding of relationship to the universe. Many people find it in religion, some people find it in nature, and other people find it on their spiritual path outside of most guidance processes.
Right. Lorne, you're a student at the Columbia program. I understand you also do yoga for prisoners?
Actually, we're working with homeless youth at a shelter in New York City on 41st Street, and we're integrating meditation. In a way, you could say yoga because it's a harmony. It's a harmony of mind and spirit. But we're integrating meditation into our already interpersonal therapy.
And
so we work.
I was just going to say, in terms of the connectedness to the spirit, the connectedness with the cosmos and everything that Lisa was just talking about, it's clear that this doesn't have to happen within the context of a formal religion. This is about however one conceives of connectedness, right?
Absolutely, and I think that it has, in a way, nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with religion, in that it's the mystical aspect of all religions, which is essentially connecting to a love of everything and connecting to a love of a higher power. And kind of that's what we wanted to foster. We went in with no intention to propagate anything religious, no intention to propagate anything spiritual, but we let the practice itself be the anchor for what was happening. And what we did is we did a 16-week meditation practice adjunct to our therapy, and we visualized as part of the meditation the best self, the best possible self, and which in a way could be considered the higher self. And when you imagine your best possible self, when you imagine the ideal state of being for your own existence, it brings you to a spiritual state, whether you have an intention or not.
What changes did you see among the homeless youth who you were working with? I don't normally associate homeless youth as being the population that's going to be most enthusiastic about introspection, meditation, yoga, these kinds of things.
So that's kind of what we thought going into it. We thought, well, how are we going to really reach out to them? Will they really take the meditation and yoga? It seems very far-fetched. But what we found out is that a lot of the guys had a lot of anger issues. So that's a instant remedy for that. Basically, if you have a lot of anger and you do meditation and introspection, you can step away from the anger. The guys are coming into therapy with the need to heal themselves, so very much it's an interest to cope with their anger. So one of the changes we saw, very big changes, that the guys could handle their anger in relationships, handle their anger in terms of their own self-awareness, and they felt happier with their relationships. They felt happier with their life. They saw their goals changing because they could facilitate positive interactions in a more succinct way. Another change that we felt is that they became closer to their best self. And that sounds pretty out there, but what it means is that the best self is a state of consciousness, and they became closer to the ideal functioning in the world. And they became more successful in their lives. They got jobs. One of them became a manager when he was sleeping in stairwells. So we saw a lot of positive changes, and we were very, very pleased with just something what meditation could do.
Lisa, you were just about to jump in there. Go ahead.
Well, the skeptic is always welcomed into our program. And so in this very powerful work, for instance, that Lorne is describing, we collected hard data. We used validated measurements psychopathology that are used in many public health studies, and using science to show that through the process of spiritual meditation, the homeless men, young men, developed lower levels of symptomology, less depression, less anxiety, and less distress. That type of clinical trial allows us to do this model work, and hey, let's try to disseminate it and share it with our colleagues across the country and other academic institutions, but also in other places of need, like homeless shelters and refugee camps.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the jury is really in on this stuff, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn's work, who was the originator of mindfulness meditation, and the data about the reductions in, I mean, you can go to a doctor, and I'm always troubled when I go to a doctor, and the first thing that they do is just prescribe a pill without any context about what my life is like, without any context about what I'm eating, about how stressed out I might be. Jon Kabat-Zinn was great at being able to look at the entire picture and say, well, we're an entire organism, and how can we make sure that we're doing the best to take care of ourselves psychologically as well as just physiologically, and the results that can have. If you go into a doctor and you have high cholesterol or high blood pressure, they can either prescribe statins or they can look at what your life is like and figure out how to make it better. I want to go to Patrick.
Absolutely, and exactly what you're describing, inner work, mindfulness work.
Patrick, you dropped out of medical school. Why?
Well, really, Josh, for the exact reasons that you were just speaking about. During my first 2 years of training in allopathic medicine, I had this nagging feeling the entire time that really something was missing, and that in order for me to provide care to patients in a way that I believed was whole and real and proper, I needed to learn more about our bodies as a working whole. And I realized at that time that I was one of people that recognized the power of suggestion, the power of ritual, and the power of belief in healing, and that was not at all about the discourse in training in medicine. So I left medical school after 2 years and started looking at traditional medicine in East Africa, spiritual medicine in East Africa, as a way to sort of broaden my own understanding of medicine and to realize that there was something beyond the biomedical aspect of medicine that plays a very central role in how we heal, how we get sick, and how we relate to each other and maintain health.
I had a doctor back in Australia who, when I would go and see him, would ask, how I was feeling, how I was feeling in my life, what I was eating, how my job was. And, not to make crude national stereotypes, but of all the doctors I've seen since I've been living in the States, that's never been the first question they've asked. It's always been just a very strictly diagnostic solution to a diagnosis. Susan, you've been waiting patiently there. I'd love to bring you in. You used to work on Wall Street. I'm just finishing rereading The Bonfire of the Vanities, which is such a great novel, and so I'm completely immersed in that crazy world. Why did you leave, and what are you doing now?
I left for exactly the reasons everyone is saying, is that it is a fairly crazy world, and I had achieved the level of success I had looked for, and I had finished my MBA at Columbia, and I was thinking my boyfriend wanted to get married, and there was the house and the suburbs and the boat and the whole thing, and I'm looking at my life going, I can't do this. And I was trying to figure out what the next step would be while I was working on Wall Street, realized that wouldn't work, and prepared to take a year off. And that year off turned out to be 8 and a 20-year path. Because once I got off Wall Street, I realized there's a really big world out there, and we didn't know that.
What has replaced the excitement of being on Wall Street, if anything?
The excitement of being myself. Because the thing that is extremely difficult when you're working in a profession as extraordinarily Wall Street has always been, certainly it's getting more and more with the 24-hour news cycle and international trading and all that. You never have a chance to think, and you certainly never have a chance to read. You're constantly doing. And it was astonishing after I started meditating, after I slowed down a little bit. I'm still a New Yorker, but I, calmed it down a touch. That the internal world is a whole lot more interesting than the external world. And the internal world in the external world is even better.
When you say the excitement of being yourself and you talk about the internal world versus the external world, what do you do on a practical basis, on a day-to-day basis, to connect to that?
To connect to that, I've been meditating essentially daily or multiple times a day, depending on the day, for 20-something years. And I don't think I actually answered your previous question, which is what do I do for a living now? I went back to Wall Street after this and decided, well, now that I'm so spiritual, I can handle it. And I was totally wrong. And I got back there and thought, I lasted 10 months and thought, I cannot do this anymore, and quit. And
so this can't fix everything. It can't fix Wall Street, but it can fix
I
some
could not
things.
fix Wall Street, and I couldn't, once I had gotten out of that constant multitasking, 14 different things happening simultaneously, state of constant panic, which is how people on Wall Street have to live, that I couldn't live like that anymore. And so I now teach to those folks. They're all my clients, and I teach business, and I teach finance, and I start skills so that my left brain has something occupied. But I'm doing, I hope, ever more in a balanced and organized way.
Patrick, I think about the amount of money that we spend on healthcare and the amount of money that we spend on prescriptions and hospital stays, and how much of that is, for example, end-of-life care, where I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but a vast proportion of the amount of money that we spend in this country on healthcare is in the last 4 months of a person's life, desperately trying to prop them up and keep them alive in what are usually quite austere conditions. Nobody likes a hospital. There are all sorts of trials that are going on around the world, like in Sweden, where they have hospitals that are being made to feel like really comfortable 5-star hotels instead of these horrible, fluorescent lit, austere places. I wonder whether we could actually save money in the long run if we were more willing to think about ways of healing that are scientific, that are proven, but that are a little bit more along the lines of what you guys are dealing with, rather than strictly the Western medical approach.
Oh, without question. That is the answer to saving money in the healthcare system. We need to think about how we can become healthier in our lives, how we prevent illness, and when we do get sick, to try to understand what it was that made us sick initially. And from an African spiritual medicine perspective, those African healers would unquestionably believe that you have a spiritual illness, and that is what has given rise to the physical illness. And until we start looking at those issues, we will continue to spend billions and billions of dollars a year needlessly pumping people with pharmaceutical medicine, when what we really need to do is look at the spiritual aspects of our lives, our relationships to culture, our relationships to our belief system, and our relationships to each other. And until then, we will continue to waste money.
Lisa, as the Director of Clinical Psychology at Columbia, how do you feel when you hear this kind of veer into the territory of African spirituality, for example? Because I know there's a big spectrum here, but I don't want us to too easily conflate the aspects of meditation that have really, really solid, proven scientific medical benefits with, I guess, a larger conversation about what some people would regard as being, I don't want to be offensive, but unscientific approaches.
Well, I think a spiritual perspective has been at the forefront of human experience for thousands of years. So in our very exciting intellectual era, we're seeing ancient understanding of spiritual reality wed with 21st century science. Oxford University Press just this month put out the Handbook of Psychology and Spirituality, in which leading scientists across disciplines share evidence consistent with what Patrick is saying about ancient African culture. We have reached a time where spirituality and science are one, or just about. The implications for a 21st century spiritually minded science are immense. First of all, the view that the universe is alive, trees, birds, and earth, is going to help us overcome our environmental crisis. A dirt world in which the earth is treated like a trash can, as in the 20th century, was consistent with the materialist, outdated view. A 21st century view sees nature as teaching, guiding, and dialogue with us. Second point, a global village. If I drop a bomb on someone in the Middle East, at the level of consciousness, my daughter wakes up in the night with a nightmare, because at the level of consciousness, we're all one. So this 21st century view, a consciousness-based science, which our students these days seem to walk in the door with an implicit understanding, a priori, is really a new way of, in turn, conducting ourselves socially, politically, as well as medically in psychology. You see what I mean?
Yes. In fact, I want to read out a live comment here that's just come through on the comment thread. It says there are three positive aspects to religion that atheists overlook: the development of compassionate ethics, the expansion of consciousness, and the cultivation of wisdom, none of which are based in superstition or require a belief in God. All else is authoritarian corruption. Are you a religious person? Are you a partaker of the authoritarian corruption, Lisa?
I believe that every human being born is born with the capacity for spiritual awareness and a dialogue with the consciousness that is in us, through us, and around us. A consciousness-based science, such as 21st century science shows in physics, in psychology, medicine, certainly Patrick understands at the level of direct service how radically different this approach is bringing wellness and transformation. This is the only way we're going to survive as a planet, and I'm not very worried. I think, our next decade or so has yet to be written, and this new generation gets it. They understand the level of reality, the bedrock of reality, consciousness, and we're all connected.
Well,
we will have a different emerging cohort of politicians, bankers, and doctors.
I love that an institution with as much credibility as Columbia University is taking this on, and hopefully the message will spread. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Here's the truth.
I want to know what you guys think. Please leave comments in the comment. Check out some of the resources. We didn't get to absolutely everything that I wanted to talk about here, so check out all the resources. It's really interesting. And of course, visit the green rooms of the upcoming segments so that you can get involved in them before they go to air. Keep watching HuffPost Live.